Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 536 for the 21st of Iyar in a regular year. So as a little disclaimer for today and possibly for another couple of episodes too, my usual microphone is not working right now. I'm in the process of getting a different cord to connect with it. So if the sound quality isn't up to par today, I apologize in advance, and I'm doing the best I can with the tools that I have. I wanted to keep this going. So with that being said, so for today, I want to talk about love. And so love is a topic that we've been talking about quite a bit in the Tanya so far, in case you haven't noticed, all about the different types and styles of love that we can have for God. And we gave a lot of analogies in terms of our fellow man. So I want you to take a moment and think about what comes to mind for you when you think of love. What kind of energy? So most likely, what you're thinking is an energy of giving, an energy of overflowing, of wanting to be close to the person that you love. These are all things that we discussed in the Tanya, and they're all very true and real. And if we wanted to break this down in a Kabbalistic sense, there's the right side and then there's the left side. The right side is more considered the side of overflowing, of giving, of kindness. The left side is the side of restraint, of holding back, of more judgment, that kind of thing. So which side do you think that love naturally falls into? So most likely you would say the right side, which would not be wrong. That would be a good, correct answer. However, what we're going to be learning about today is we're actually going to be learning about a totally different and radical type of love that actually comes from the left side, that actually is not so much about getting close to your beloved and wanting to give to your beloved, but it's rather more about becoming so enraptured in your love that you actually lose your sense of self and you actually get totally consumed in your beloved, and you want to expire in your beloved, and you want to lose all sense of identity completely. So I recently read a short story which really helped me visualize what this type of love is and what it's all about. So I've developed a sort of personal tradition that on my way back from Israel, when I get to the airport, to Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, I go to a bookstore and I buy one or two books in Hebrew, usually novels, like something fun and not too heavy, something kind of light, and I read the books on the plane back from Israel, and it sort of gives me like a feeling of I'm still in Israel and I can still practice my Hebrew even though I'm leaving and all of that. So on my recent flight back from Israel, one of the books which I bought is actually a book which I found out afterwards. It was originally written in Japanese, believe it or not, but it's been subsequently translated into English and many languages, including Hebrew. So I actually read the book in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's called Gvarim Lelo Nashim by Haruki Murakami. In English, it's called Men Without Women. And the book is basically it's a bunch of short stories written by this man talking about stories of men and their loss of women and what their lives are like. So in one of the stories, really interesting, it's about this man who is a very successful plastic surgeon, and he has no interest in commitment, and he dates multiple women all the time, and he has no interest in committing to any of them and ever getting married. But at one point, he actually meets a woman who he falls in love with. And he falls so deeply in love with her that it actually takes over his entire life. To the point, and I'm not going to share the entire story, but to the point that he actually ends up stopping to eat. He ends up stopping to work. He ends up unfortunately, and sorry if this is a spoiler for anybody who ends up reading the book, but he ends up actually dying of anorexia because he is so consumed by his love for this woman, which he can't have, because she ends up actually betraying him and running off with someone else and everything. So that's a whole other story. But he basically becomes so consumed in his love for her that he literally loses himself in the love. He literally becomes so consumed that he withers away, both emotionally and intellectually and even physically, where he stops going to work, he stops taking care of his clothes, he stops taking care of his apartment, and he stops eating, he stops nourishing himself, and then unfortunately he dies at the end. So why am I bringing up this very depressing story to you? It's not to depress you, but it's because we're actually going to be learning about a certain type of love today, which is of this nature when it comes to God. And it's not, luckily for us, God is not going to betray us and God is not going to run away and that kind of thing. But we've been learning a lot so far in Tanya, if you've been paying attention, about love in general and loving God and different ways and forms of loving God. And all the types of love that we've learned about so far involve this energy of coming close to God, of moving towards God. And this is usually what we think of when it comes to love. When we think of love, we usually think of a movement that's going forward, that's towards the other person, that's like a giving kind of nature, that comes from the right side, as we've been discussing, the side of chesed, and giving and overflowing. But today we're actually going to learn about another kind of love, a love that actually comes from the left side, from the side of severity, from the side of the gevuras, as we know. And ultimately the source of that is actually in Bina, which is also from the left side. And this type of love is one that involves a lot more, it's less about moving like in the direction of giving and wanting to be close, as opposed to trying to get away from self, because not wanting to have any sense of self other than God, and wanting to be consumed in the one that you love, in this case God. And again, I don't know if it was proper to bring this story from the book, because it is kind of a depressing story and it leaves like this really sad feeling. But the relationship here that we'll learn with God, again, the difference is that God does not abandon us, God does not betray us, and God actually doesn't want us to lose ourselves to the point of expiration in that way. So we actually do need to find a way to balance this kind of love with being grounded in Torah and mitzvahs, as we will learn. But I think there is something that we can learn from this story and from this idea, this visualization of being so lovesick and so all consuming in your love for your beloved, to the point that you actually lose total disregard for yourself, and your whole entire being wants to be consumed and subsumed in God. So this is the type of love that we're going to be learning about today. And for context, we are starting a new chapter. We're beginning a new chapter in Likkutei Amarim, which is chapter 50. So we'll get into the text soon, but just as a little breakdown of this, what we'll learn is that the first type of love, this overflowing, more what we commonly think of as love, is likened to the element of silver, versus this other more all-subsuming, consuming kind of love is likened to gold. And we'll actually see that there's an etymological relationship between the word silver and the idea of longing, of wanting to be close to the one that we love. And we'll also learn about, interestingly enough, that the Levim, the Levites, which my family actually comes from Levites, so this feels kind of close to home for me, is they actually correspond to this other level of love, this more intense level of love that comes from the left side. So I think let's get straight into the text. And for context, we are beginning a new chapter today. This is chapter 50. We're actually nearing the end, believe it or not, of Likkutei Amarim, the first section of Tanya. Very exciting. And so this section begins where the Alter Rebbe says that he alludes to all the other previous loves that we've talked about. He says all of these previous loves that we've discussed in the Tanya so far, they all come from the right side, and they all are related to the idea of the Kohanim. And because there's this idea, which, and this comes from the Zohar, where it says the Kohen is a man of chesed, and chesed again is this right side, this loving kindness, this giving. And it's called, and the Kohanim are also called, they're called Kesef HaKadashim, which Kesef HaKadoshim literally means a longing for holy things. And etymologically, we see this phraseology in another place in Bereshis, chapter 31:30, and this is where Lavan says to Yaakov, he says to him, nichsafta leveit avicha, that you longed for your father's home. So we see that this word nichsafta, kesef, is this idea of longing, of wanting to be close to the person that you love. And interestingly, in Hebrew, the word kesef or nichsaf, it also means silver. And so now this is where we're going to see the contrast between gold and silver. So then the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says that, okay, so while there's this level of love that is, it's related to this idea of kesef, this idea of longing, which also means silver, there's another aspect of love, which is even higher than this, like the way that gold is superior to silver. So it's like we all know that, like, in terms of precious metals, silver is very valuable. It's really great. If you got jewelry that was pure silver, it's really nice. But we all know that gold is even higher. Gold is more valuable. And the Alter Rebbe says that this love, which is likened to gold over silver, is like a love of coals, of glowing coals, of rishvei esh, it's called. And it comes from the supernal gvuros, the supernal severities, which come from the supernal bina. So bina, again, Kabbalistically, if you kind of have this map in your head, bina is on the left side. So the spheres are chokhmah, bina, das. So chokhmah is the right, bina is the left, and then there's das. And then there's chesed on the right side. Again, that's when we get into the emotive attributes. So chokhmah, bina, das is the intellectual attributes. Chesed, gvura, tiferes are the first three emotive attributes. So if you wanted, so chesed is on the right, just like chokhmah is on the right, gvura is on the left, just like bina is on the left. So there's a connection between gvura and bina. So this love that we're describing here, this new kind of love that's likened to gold, comes from the aspect of the gvuras, of the left side, which is related to the supernal bina, the supernal also left side. And meaning to say that this love, so what is bina? We know that bina is the idea of understanding and comprehension. So it comes through the meditation upon the greatness of the Ein Sof, the greatness of God, and recognizing that nothing exists aside from him. And through this recognition, then the soul becomes really aroused and excited for the preciousness of this splendor of God, and will want to look upon the preciousness of the king. And this is just like, again, if we're talking about these fiery coals of a mighty flame. So the flame, if you look at the energy of a flame, the flame is moving upwards. So if you look at like a candle, let's say, and you look at the flame of the candle, the fire in the candle, it's moving upwards. It wants to expire. It wants to get away from the wick. Or it wants to get away. If you look at a bonfire, we just passed Lag BaOmer, and we know that, in a bonfire, the fire, again, it looks like it's trying to get away from the wood. It's trying to expire in its source. And so this idea, basically going back to what we're talking about in terms of this love, this is where this element of fire, this godly element of fire that's found in the godly soul. So if you remember, both the godly soul as well as the animal soul are made up of different elements, and one of the elements of which is fire. So if the element of fire predominates inside of the godly soul, this will lead a person to have this great, great thirst. And this great thirst is this feeling of, when we say tzameh lecha nafshi, so there's a nigun, tzameh lecha nafshi, and it comes from Tehillim, and it means my soul thirsts for you. So this is like a very thirsty kind of love. It's not just like a quiet love that just like enjoying the other person's company. This is a love that is really yearning and really striving towards something, and it wants to get out of itself. And not only is it just like this thirst, but it actually reaches the level of cholat ahava, which is love sickness. So it's like when people describe being lovesick, it's a real thing. This is the source of where it comes from. And not only is it going to come to this level of love sickness, so first it becomes thirsty, then it's lovesick, and then it gets to the point of the expiration of the soul in truth, as it is written. And this is taken from Tehillim, chapter 84, verse 3, where it says, Gam kalta nafshi, that and my soul expires. So there's this idea of love and expiration being hand in hand. So this is where I was reminded of that short story that I told you about in the introduction in Gvarim Lelo Nashim, about the man who fell in love and totally lost himself and his whole entire, not only identity, but his actual physical body, became consumed in his love for this woman. This is the type of love that we're talking about, the type of love that could literally lead a person to losing themselves in the beloved. And now the Alter goes on and he says that this type of love that we're talking about, it sounds like this really like, wow, love. This is actually the source of the Levites down here. And then in brackets, the Alter says that it's actually taught that in the future to come, the Levites are actually going to be higher than the Kohanim. And the Arizal of blessed memory explained this. And he said that he explained the pasuk, there's a pasuk in Yechezkel, chapter 44, verse 15, which says that Vehakohanim haleviim, where it says, but the Kohanim, the Levim, so it sounds weird. It's like, are they Kohanim or are they Levim? What are we talking about? So the Arizal explains that this is referencing the fact that the Levim will actually be the Kohanim of the future. And if we look at what was the service of the Levim, the service of the Levim was to lift up their voices in song and in thanks with great singing and melody and harmony and with just musicality and all of that stuff. And so if you think about that, like, what is singing? What is this idea of the music? The music goes about in this way of like coming and returning. It's ratzo v'shov. And so this is this idea, like even if you think about music in general, it has like motion to it. There's this, and their music in particular moved in this way. So it was going up and coming down. And this idea of ratzo v'shov, this is a Kabbalistic idea that comes up quite a bit, which again, this is coming from this idea of like, it wants to go up. It's like it has to force itself to come back down, but it really does want to go up. So this is alluding to this really intense love that is like this really fiery flame that comes out from the bazak, it's called. So what is the bazak? Bazak is an obscure word that not a lot of people know how to translate. Some people, we don't really know how to translate it. Some people translate it as lightning or a flash. There's an idea that it is a crucible for refining gold. That's one translation. So this is a translation that maybe we can think about here because we're talking about gold. So it's like a flame that comes out of this crucible for refining gold. So it's like coming out of the gold, which the gold again is is superior to the silver. And and this is explained further at length in the Gemara in Chagiga, page 13b. And then the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says that we can't really explain this properly in writing, but every person who has a heart, a feeling heart, and a mind, really, and will think on this in a really deep way, they'll be able to really connect their minds and their understanding to God. And through this, they will come to find this hidden light in their intellectual soul, each person according to their ability. And then in brackets, the Alter Rebbe says there are those who are affected like this, and there are those who are affected like this, meaning to say that not everybody's going to be affected by this in the same way. Some people will have a bigger ability to be affected, some people a lesser ability, but everybody will be somewhat affected if they really, really sit and meditate upon this. And then, and so basically the idea is that this may sound like this really crazy, lofty level of love, of wanting to like really expire within God and like lose your sense of self entirely. However, the Alter Rebbe is saying that there is something to this, and there is something we can actually tap into this to some extent if we really meditate and we delve and look into ourselves in a really deep way. We open up our hearts to this. And then the Alter Rebbe concludes and he says, but this should be preceded with the meditation of not wanting to sin, of having fear of sin, to move away from evil with completion, so that you won't have your sins separate between you and God. So, meaning to say that, just to explain that in more simple terms, is that while this might seem really like a really lofty level to become so consumed in God and subsumed in God that when a person wants to lose themselves and everything like that, like, okay, that's all great and good, but we need to ground this first in practicality, in the level of saying that, okay, but number one is I recognize that I cannot sin. I cannot go against God. I'm not going to go against God's will. And as long as we have that basis, as long as we have that foundation, then, okay, from there we can get to that level of expiring within God. So that's it for today, and we'll continue along these lines tomorrow and get a little bit deeper into it, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.